and welcome to VetJobs and Military Spouse Jobs Salute to Industry series. My name is Angie Fair, and I am an active duty Army spouse of 17 years, and I get to oversee the brand new initiative here at VetJobs, Military Spouse Jobs, called the Recruiter Connect Community. And our next guest actually participates in that, along with all of our other services available through VetJobs and Military Spouse Jobs. So Mike, thanks for joining us today. Mike, or more commonly known as Mac, is actually an Air Force veteran, and he is the recruiting manager for Stellar Innovations and Solutions. So thanks for joining us today.
Well, it's my pleasure, Angie. Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Well, awesome. Why don't we start with you just telling us a little bit about yourself, how you came into recruiting and Stellar Innovations?
Well, okay. Well, like you previously mentioned, I served in the Air Force, and I separated a long time ago before the internet and personal computers. So back when I got out, the only way you really found a job was to pick up the Sunday newspaper and look at the want ads, classifieds. And I didn't really get any help or assistance when I separated. I don't think we had a TAPS office. I had no counseling. It was basically, here's your separation papers, good luck. And I was out the door. And this was 1980, a different
pat
time.
On the back and go.
Different era. And so I got out. I really wanted to stay in, but I had to separate for family situations. I was needed back home. So, I was looking for a position, and my mother had worked at General Motors. She eventually retired from there, and her job was what they called a skip tracer. She would track down people that didn't pay their car payments, to find out where they were. And I remember one day she showed me she had received a citation from the FBI because she had found somebody that they had been looking for, and she had tracked the person down. And I happened to see this ad for a technical recruiter, and I was like, well, that's similar to what my mom's doing. I mean, you're looking for candidates, you're kind of tracking people down, that type of thing. And I applied, and it was a little different back then because where I wound up working, you had to interview with everybody in the office and get the thumbs up to be selected. I went through 5 interviews. And every time I went for another interview, one of the other people were on vacation. And I'd come back, and then somebody else was out. And after the 5th interview, I looked at the manager. I said, I don't mean any disrespect, but do we see the light at the end of this tunnel, like anytime soon? Like 5 interviews. He said, no, you're in, you're good. So it was a recruiting agency, and I started off recruiting for engineering. And about 6 months later, I'll never forget, the manager called us into a meeting, told us that we've got to get into this new discipline. And we're like, okay, what is it? He goes, it's called data processing, which is eventually turned into IT, but it was called data processing. And at that time, it was all mainframe computers, IBM, COBOL, CICS. And the only places you would find an IBM mainframe would either be in the government or large insurance companies because they were really expensive. Mid-sized companies would have the mid-frames like IBM System 32s, 34s, things like that. So that's how I got started, but it was a totally different recruiting environment back then.
Yeah. Paper and pencil. Huh?
It was brutal. It was brutal. I had they gave me a 3-ring binder with paper in it to keep notes of the people I talked to. I had a telephone, and we had the entire set of Thomas Registry books, which lists every company in the United States. That's what I had. And it was tracking down people one at a time, trying to get referrals, calling into companies, trying to have them give me names. I mean, it was just brutal. Today, I can make a post and have 300 people apply. So It's a lot, I would say, easier, at least as far as finding people and promoting opportunities, but you're still dealing with people. So everything else still applies, their needs, their wants, take care of their family, things like that. So, so
it sounds like you've sort of spanned the gamut here within recruiting and HR, but what specifically led you to Stellar Innovations?
Oh, okay. Well, like I said, I found the position after I separated from the one ads, and for the next 37 years or so, I guess, I was working in the civilian commercial world. I've worked as a corporate recruiter. I've been a consultant. I worked in search firms, agencies, had clients. But after serving in the military, it's hard to describe, but I felt like a fish out of water a little bit in the commercial world. And I had this patriotic itch that I just couldn't scratch. It was like I still wanted to do something and serve my country in some capacity. And I had worked for another civilian firm several years ago and was laid off. And so I'm looking for a new position. And one night, my wife was sitting on the couch, and maybe this is an example of karma. I don't know, but I just happened to say to her, you know where I'd like to work? And she said, where? I said, I would love to work up at the Army base, Aberdeen Proving Grounds, because I miss being in the military environment. I kid you not, Angie. I think it was the next day I had a voicemail on my phone from the recruiter at my prior company, my office stationed at Aberdeen Proving Grounds. And I was like, you have got to be kidding me. I just told my wife I'd love to work there. And a day later, they had this opportunity. So I interviewed for that and was accepted. And my office was at the Aberdeen Proving Ground at the Army base. And I was a lead technical recruiter there. I got to support nationwide classified Air Force programs, Army, Navy programs. And, you know, from day one, I felt like, okay, I'm back in my element now. This is my niche. This is where I feel most comfortable. I got to interface with POCs at various bases that were tech sergeants, master sergeants. I felt like I'd come back home, basically, and I felt very comfortable working with vets. I had the background, you know, I knew the military. I could talk to them. But more importantly for them, I knew how to look at their resume and read between the lines and convert what they've done to what we were doing. Now, fortunately, we were working on military programs, so it all kind of gelled, but I absolutely just love that. I love working with the vets and helping them. And I was there for a little over 2 years, and they had lost a big contract that I was not involved with. I didn't even work that contract, but it affected the entire company. And eventually I was given notice, a 3-week notice, that I was getting laid off, but everybody else was too. So I put my resume out on the web, and just a few days went by, and the director of HR at Stellar left me a voicemail. I called her. We talked on a Sunday. She set me up for a Teams video interview the next day, Monday, with her, the CEO, and the then director of proposals, who was now vice president. And you know, it was great. I'm talking to all three, and my boss happened to mention that, hey, Irvin, who is our CEO, he's a retired senior master sergeant in the Air Force. I'm like, sign me up. I'm good. I'm here. I'm yours. Take me. You know, like
you're able to make that connection.
Absolutely. And what was really ironic is I remember at my previous company, like I said, I was there a little over 2 years, but I never once had a chance to talk to the CEO. But at Stellar, I'm not even hired yet, and I'm talking to the CEO. I'm like, this is my company I've been looking for the last 40 years or whatever. And it's been great. It's the company I've always searched for, real people. Every year they sponsor the Stellar Family Day down at Kings Island Amusement Park in Mason, Ohio. And that's not your typical amusement park. They have some of the top 10 ranked roller coasters in the country. I mean, it's a big thing. And I live in Maryland. So I got my wife and packed up my truck and drove up to Mason. It took all day Friday, about 8 hours. And there's a hotel there right at the entrance to Kings Island. We stayed there. We had an Outback Steakhouse right there. We're good to go. The next day, we go over to Kings Island, and I got to meet the CEO, my boss, all my colleagues, people I've hired in person. And I knew I'd make the right call because I walked up, I saw the CEO, and he was standing there in a T-shirt, shorts, and flip-flops. I'm like, that's my guy. Yes. Because he is
enjoying the day. That's awesome.
Yeah. When we think of CEOs, I've supported a lot of CEOs in the commercial world, and they were the stereotypical CEOs in the ivory tower, Every time they left their office, there was a little entourage that would follow them around, that type of thing. Our guy, he's a retired Air Force NCO. He's a down in the trenches with the troops kind of guy, very generous. And I also had asked him one time when we were talking, I said, let me ask you, what was your reasoning or decision to start Stellar? What was your purpose? How did you come about starting Stellar? And he said, after serving the government and the military for 25 years, he said, I still felt that I wanted to continue serving. I had something to offer. And he said, I still wanted to be able to serve my country and help them, with national security. And I was like, I had the same patriotic itch myself. I'm like, I still want to do something. So even though what I do is just a very small part, we are supporting Air Force military programs. Primarily, we also have federal contracts like for the DLA and the federal government. But we are supporting the Air Force primarily at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. We are the prime federal contractor for 18 information technology programs. And the goal of the Air Force is national defense, security for the country. They're all part of that. All of the branches, their number one priority, provide defense for the country. So it's enough to scratch my patriotic itch and know that I'm doing something bigger than myself. And even though it's a very small part, I am a small cog in the wheel, but I am playing a part of providing good talent to support and serve the Air Force, which in turn supports national defense. So I kind of still feel like I'm back in the game a little bit. So
yeah, I totally get that. It sounds like Stellar has a really great company culture and leadership. So government contractor, mostly working in the IT space, correct?
Primarily, we do have a separate VTC division, both in Ohio and also down at Warner Robins Air Force Base in Georgia. And they basically, it's IT per se, but they basically will set up video teleconferencing capability in conference rooms, and they'll set up the monitors and the phone systems and all of that. That's a separate division. But like I said, we've won several new contracts in the last few months. We just won a new one last week. We are currently on about 10 DLA contracts, which is federal. So we're continuing to go out and get more and more business and bid on more and more contracts. But I'm primarily supporting the DoD side for Wright-Patterson for our 18 IT programs. I have a recruiter who focuses on the proposal side, works with our VP of proposals, because sometimes when you bid on a government contract, they may want you to include the resume of one or two key personnel. And it's not just pick a resume off the internet. You have to have a letter of intent signed. You got to prove that, yes, we've talked to the person. They are ready, willing, and able to satisfy this contract. You have to present all of that to show the government that, hey, you're already locked and loaded. You've got people lined up. You're a serious contender for that.
Yeah, that contract piece and filling roles can be very unique. So we'll talk a little bit later about some of the application process, but I would love to focus in a little bit on some of the roles that you and Stellar at Large have that you're currently recruiting for. It sounds like you have quite a few new contracts. And so if you just wanted to highlight a few roles that you guys are actively recruiting for, I'd love to discuss that.
Yeah, we have new opportunities surfacing constantly. It's actually gotten to the point where some of my recruiters, we joke that it feels like we're playing whack-a-mole. We fill several positions, a few more come up, fill a few more come up. But one of the primary reasons that we have so many opportunities is something that I have never seen before in my career. I've never seen another company that can hold a candle to Stellar. But when our CEO, being retired Air Force, when he started Stellar in 2008, he set our company up specifically to be a promote from within company. He had that common sense military mindset. I want to reward my employees for their hard work, loyalty, dedication. Every time a position opens, first thing we do is we look internally. If it's for a senior systems administrator, there is a chance that we'll have a mid-level systems admin that's ready to promote up. If so, we'll promote that person. And then before my recruiting team and I go out, look for a mid-level, we'll look to see if we have a junior level that's ready to promote up to mid. And if so, we'll promote them up. So the position may initially come out as a senior level systems admin, but by the time my recruiting team and I are actually looking outside to fill it, it may wind up becoming a junior level position after the dust settles and the promotions are done. They happen so fast around here. I call them battlefield promotions. We're a lean and mean fighting machine, and we have no corporate bureaucracy. We have no committees that have to adjourn and make decisions. We don't take 2 or 3 weeks to figure out if we're going to hire somebody. It's like one day, 2 days, quick. Everything moves very quick. But the promotion opportunities here are off the charts. And I can say that with 100% confidence because I can point to a slew of people that I've hired that have risen up through the ranks very quickly. And it's also happened to me because I started as a lead recruiter, lead/senior level recruiter. And I was here for 8 months when the CEO called me directly. And I was like, I didn't know whether I should be worried. I was like, why is the CEO calling me? What did I do? I didn't do it. So I answered the phone. I said, Urban, I didn't do it. I don't look like I don't know what it is. I didn't do it. And we laughed. And he just said he was really glad he had an opportunity to meet me in person the prior month in August at the Kings Island Family Day. And he said, the reason I'm calling you is I want you to be my recruiting manager. And I'm sitting there thinking, did I just hear that? Because this had never been discussed. My recruiting team, we're part of HR. All hiring, everything to do with employees runs through HR. So we pretty much have our finger on the pulse of just about everything dealing with our employees. Had never heard a peep about this. So I asked him to repeat that. And he laughed. Yeah, I said, I want you to be my recruiting manager. Do you accept? I said, yes, sir, I do. Whatever you need. He said, good. Don't worry about anything. I'll take care of everything. Great. Okay. The only thing I did next day is I got on LinkedIn. I got on Teams. I got on Outlook. I updated my signature file, all my profiles with my new title and all.
Smooth transition.
Yeah. Now, here's the funny thing. I was talking to my boss on Teams. We had a live video chat going on. And she asked me, she said, what did the CEO want? And I looked at her kind of sneaky, like, come on, did you know you knew about this? She goes, what are you talking about? I'm like, come on, you had to know. She goes, Mac, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, you don't? I said, the CEO called me to tell me he was promoting me to recruiting manager. She goes, hey, Mac, congratulations. No, I had no idea. I'm like, you didn't? So that's why I call them battlefield promotions. A decision is made, boom, I'll take care of the paperwork. And the next day you are whatever.
I think that's really good because sometimes in the recruiting process these days, it can take, I think I saw yesterday, the average time to fill is 77 days in the US, the average time to fill a position. And so the ability for your organization to move quickly really speaks well on the decision makers and your recruiting team as well. So tell me, I know you mentioned you had a lot of roles within the Wright-Patterson in Ohio and the Air Force Base, and then some in Warner Robins. But are there other locations, or can you support remote positions? Do your roles require on-site because of clearance requirements, or can you tell us a little bit more about your positions in that capacity?
The majority of our roles, if they're supporting Wright-Patterson, are typically on base. And over the last couple of years with COVID, we've gone back and forth. They work on base, then everybody work remote. And then they call them back, and then they go back to remote. And then they went to a hybrid schedule, and it was like a ping pong ball back and forth. A lot has to deal with the actual program itself, what they will allow, and also the type of position you have. So, for instance, excuse me, if you are an information system security officer and you have a top secret SCI clearance, you're working in a SCIF. You have to be on base because that's where the SCIF's located. So that's one of those positions where you've got to physically be there just based on the nature of your work. If you are a software developer, you may be able to work 100% remote, or sometimes they may say, okay, You can work 4 days a week remote, but we still like everybody in the office 1 day a week just to promote congruity and, give you that normalcy of interacting with your colleagues, and we can
Good
see
touch
you,
point.
that type of thing. So a lot has to do with the actual program. So the majority of our positions at Wright-Patterson, technically, if they're technical IT positions, usually are working on base. Every now and then we may have a position that supports the Air Force at Wright-Pat, but like we have a division that is very heavy into SharePoint design development. I've hired people that were out of state that were able to work 100% remote. But most recently, the program wanted everybody to work remote 4 days a week, come into the office 1 day a week, just so they could count on everybody being there. So it kind of depends. Now, for the DLA on the federal side, one of the previous contracts we won was for like SQL developers or SQL administrators. That type of work can be done remote. So I could have hired anyone around the country. The only stipulation was they needed to live within an hour and a half drive of a local DLA office in case a situation surfaced where they would need to go in. Maybe they would call an all hands meeting. Maybe they would have some kind of a training session. They would need everybody there, but they were able to work remote. Now, the most recent DLA contract we won was for what they called basic level PC technicians, and they were supporting specific DLA offices at various locations around the country. So we had, for instance, Columbus, Ohio, Battle Creek, Michigan, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Richmond, Virginia, Fort Belvoir, Virginia, and they all had local DLA offices, but those were in-office on-site positions because they had to go in and support them in person. But we did have those opportunities around the country. And then they also gave us one specific position for a senior level PC tech, and that was in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. So I wasn't able to convince my boss to send me down for a scouting trip, but I would have loved to have gone down there.
You needed to do some recruiting research.
Reconnaissance. I needed to check out, just business, of course. But so it really depends. We have one person that works out at Hill Air Force Base in Utah, which is part of our Wright-Patterson program. And that is for a position that's called ADPE technician. And basically that's automatic data processing equipment. So that position only requires a secret clearance. There's no certifications involved, but we primarily for that role, they keep track of the IT inventory for the Air Force. Laptops, cell phones, monitors, keyboards, mice, parts, whatever. They receive them, they hand them out, they keep track of how many cell phones a squadron has or what have you. So it doesn't necessarily require any type of certification. So those positions are good for us because I do get a lot of transitioning military or even civilians with secret clearances that do not have an IT certification. So this position is a way for us to get them on board. And then once they're here, they can take advantage of our tuition reimbursement program, start working on getting an IT cert. Once they have it, now they will qualify for 80% more opportunities we have that require the certs. So the general requirement is from the Air Force, if the person's position involves them having access to the Air Force systems or the NIPR or SIPR secure networks, they're going to want that security plus. So they know that they've been trained in spotting phishing attempts, hacking, denial of service, things along that line. So I would say most IT roles that we have are secret and security plus, or it could be another IAT level 2 cert. There's several other ones they could have. Security plus just happens to be the one most prominent and most in demand, most recognized. And then we also have programs that work on more highly classified projects, and they require either a top secret or a top secret with SCI eligibility or a TSSCI. So, that's usually our.
So, Mac, let me ask you, regarding your positions, are you all willing to sponsor a candidate with the right skills to sponsor their clearance, or are you looking for people that already have a clearance?
For the most part, I would say we're already looking for people that already have a clearance. Not that we have not sponsored someone, but it gets a little tricky because, for instance, let's say I have an opening on a certain program for a systems administrator, and they need a secret and a security plus. Okay. And if the person does not have a clearance, we can put them in for an interim clearance or a clearance. The problem is that we do not process the clearance. It's the government that processes. So there's never any telling how long that process is going to take. If someone has a secret and we're upgrading them to a top secret, it could take a year. It could take 6 months, 9 months. The issue for the company is twofold. Number one, what do we do with that person while we're waiting for 3 months or 6 months to get the clearance? The second thing is that position is still open. We have to get somebody in there to handle that work because the government is expecting us to perform our duties. So that's where it becomes somewhat of a catch-22 with people that don't have a clearance. Not that we would not want to hire them, but what are we going to do with them for months, half a year while we're waiting for their clearance? We still have to find somebody to fill the position. So, but we do have this unofficial program, which we call our overflow program. What did I call it? I named it something like potential talent program, something like that, where if we've come across someone who we feel has very good potential, like really good, maybe they have a cert, but they don't have a clearance, or maybe they have a clearance, but don't have a cert. It's a case-by-case basis. We're successful so far about 4 or 5 times in the last year or two. But if we feel someone is really has a lot of potential, I can petition the vice president to say, could we consider this person for our overflow program? And then we'll bubble it up to our CEO. And basically what that is we're not putting them on a government billable program. Our CEO is absorbing the costs. He's going to pay them out of Stellar's fund, out of the corporate side. But we've hired people like that and gave them the opportunity to get their clearance or to get a certification because we knew once they had it, now we can transfer them and move them into an actual position. So it's kind of like an opportunity to take someone that's potentially really good and put them in a holding pattern with the company, get them all set up and started. And then once they qualify for other opportunities, it's kind of like growing our own, so to speak.
Right. Creating that bench of talent for sure.
Yeah, we don't really do that a lot. Again, it's case by case. And, that's something that comes right out of Stellar's pocket, so to speak. So it really does have to be somebody really good that as soon as they get their cert or their clearance is adjudicated or what have you, we know we're going to have a spot for them and we can move them in and out. But I've hired at least 4 or 5 people on that program, and it's worked out very well. So as the situation arises, I do have that tool that I can bubble up and bring up. So it
sounds like having, for veterans and transitioning service members, having that clearance already adjudicated is really going to be a big benefit for them.
Absolutely. And I would, as a veteran who wound up working in the civilian commercial world and losing my clearance, I had no idea. I didn't know. I could have worked for a government consulting firm and kept my clearance or a federal contract. I had nobody to help me or even bring that possibility up. I did not know. I would guard that clearance with my life because that, in my opinion, a veteran, if you have a clearance, you have the best of both worlds. If you wanted to apply to a civilian commercial company, you could. But that clearance is your magic key that opens the door to more elite positions on the DoD military side that the rest of the public does not have access to. They don't qualify for those. So I would never want to give up my clearance intentionally because it is almost impossible to get it back. Once you lose it, it's a lot easier to keep it. And the other thing I will say about that, this is my personal experience and observations. Working again in the civilian commercial world, being laid off multiple times due to mergers, acquisitions, stock prices going up and down. And, in that world, a lot of companies are subject to all different types of influences, bad PR, mergers, acquisitions, the stock market crashes, the CEO makes a wrong decision or something, the company stock drops and people get laid off through no fault of their own. In our world,
pretty constant.
We're fully funded by the federal government. They can always print money if they want. Commercial companies can't do that, but the government, you can't get any more secure financial backing than the federal government. Our contracts are fully funded. We are supporting the Air Force, which is supporting national security. So we are involved in the number one priority of the U.S. So we've got that going for us, but we're not necessarily subject to what the stock market does. Twitter fires 50% of their people. Zuckerberg laid off 25,000 people at Facebook. He lost $60 billion in a couple of days because his stock dropped. Doesn't bother us at all. We're on a whole different world over here. So we're kind of in this little, I call it the secure bubble, where we can look out and watch the rest of the world having difficulties. But every day we go back to work because we're supporting national defense, and all of our contracts are fully funded by the federal government. So we don't have to necessarily worry about
there's some certainty there. So what can a candidate expect from the application and interview process with Stellar? Okay.
Well, basically, if they see one of our posts, or they can go to our career page, it's stellar-innovations.com/careers, or they can just go to the main site, stellar-innovations.com, and they'll have a tab for click for careers. That page scrapes our ATS system, and every position that we upload to our ATS is automatically added to that page. And if we fill a position and close it out, it's removed from our career page. It is a little challenging to wade through at times because that page does not differentiate between our DoD Wright-Patterson positions and our DLA positions, or our federal, or maybe positions that we're looking for someone because we're putting a proposal through. We need somebody that's willing to work on the proposal, but everything will basically be listed there. If they click a position, the individual description page will surface. They'll get to see the requirements, the duties, what's involved, what clearance is required, what certifications. U.S. citizenship is always required, every position. And then there's an apply button. Now, most of our positions will also have a little questionnaire attached as they go through the process, mainly just to verify, do you have a security clearance? Mm-hmm. Do you have an IT certification? Are you a U.S. citizen? Are you open to relocate? Sometimes we have transitioning members that are open to moving anywhere in the country. If they say, yeah, I'm willing to come to Dayton, great. Okay. So we have a few questions like that just to kind of make sure, do you meet the criteria, and then their resumes will show up in our ATS, and myself or the recruiters will go in. We'll be able to open up the each individual applicant's application. We'll open up, their answers. If the position requires a top secret clearance and they say, no, I have no clearance, nothing I can do, I'm sorry. We move to the next candidate and so forth. But what I basically do from there, if I see somebody that looks really interesting that meets the requirements, I will email them personally. Say, Bob, I noticed you had applied for our systems engineer position. I'd like an opportunity to speak with you. Please reply with your availability, and I'll be happy to set up a time for us to chat. And then they'll reply, hey, Mac, thank you very much. I'm open Wednesday or Thursday. I can talk in the afternoon. Hey, Bob, how about Wednesday at 2 o'clock? Okay, great. Boom. We set it up, and then I call them, and we're off and running at that point. I also have a lot of people that will reach out to me directly, maybe through LinkedIn, or they were referred to me. And rather than put them through standing in line and applying to a position, I tell them not to worry about even applying. Just I'll add you to the position on the back end. I'm working with you directly. You don't need to stand in line. Just, we're good to go. So lots of variations, but it's a very simple process. And even when we hire someone, one of my personal pet peeves of all time is when I was looking for a job it always used to just get on my nerves when I would submit in my opinion, a wonderfully crafted resume. I had everything detailed and documented. And then you go to fill out a company's application, and then they want you to do it all over again. Mm-hmm. I'm like, oh Lord, it's either typing or copy pasting, but it's just, they had the resume. So when I got here, I petitioned my boss, the HR director. I let her know about my pet peeve, and we have made that section optional. So when we're hiring someone and they have to fill out an application, it's a very simple process. The first page is basically name, address, phone number, email, things like that. What high school did you go to? A couple of references. They can, if they want, for whatever reason, to fill out the prior work history, they can, but they can breeze right through it.
But if not, just including a resume is sufficient.
Yeah, I already have the resume, and they're not going to get to the point of filling out our application unless we're hiring them. So,
anything you can do to streamline the process as a recruiter is going to be very beneficial to you.
Yeah, and we've also about a year and a half ago, we adopted using DocuSign. So I no longer had to email candidates with attachments, and they scan them and print them and scan them. Now everything's electronic, and most people, it takes them 15 to 20 minutes to do the whole offer process, sign their offer letter, do their I-9 form, upload their ID, and then complete the application. It's point and click, copy, paste, boom, 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 very quick. So that has saved me an immense amount of time.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And then internally, what I really love that Stellar did for us is that they developed a custom SharePoint app for myself and the recruiting team. So every position shows up in a recruiter section on this portal. And if I'm filling it with Bob, let's say, and I hire Bob, I go into that position. I put his name, address, phone number, just some details. And then I click run flow, and it runs a flow. But what that does is that automatically sends out an email to one of the directors that sets up their Stellar email, another director of special projects that contacts them to get them the hardware that they need, laptop, monitor, and so forth. Our comptroller gets a copy for payroll, so she can set the person up payroll. HR, my boss, gets a copy because she's going to send them tax forms and say, how do you want to declare? You want to be single,
right?
One, whatever. That's all automatic now. In the past, I had to send everybody an individual email like, hey, Bob's starting on this date and all, and we were back and forth. But now the SharePoint system, once I load the candidate, click the button, it automatically.
That sounds like it makes the onboarding process a lot more smooth for the candidates. So that's great to hear. So, well, awesome. I know we're kind of running short on time here, but I did want to just ask if there's any interesting activities or events that Stellar support. You talked about the annual
yes, yeah, I love that
event that they have at the at the amusement park. But anything else that you want to share about Stellar?
But we have now. Again, it changed up a little bit the last few years because of the COVID thing. But now we're kind of back to normal. But Stellar usually has a Halloween party. They have a Christmas party. Last year it was, I live in Maryland, so I'm not in that Ohio area, but in the area of where our headquarters is located, there is a dinner theater there, and they had the Christmas party at the dinner theater. So everybody got to watch a production, and then they had dinner, and the CEO loves to hand out gift cards. He's a very generous guy. He's handing out gift cards. I did not travel for those because it's usually like a 3-hour event. But I travel to Mason, Ohio every August for Kings Island because that's like an all-day thing. And I get to I'll basically get there at 10 a.m. when they open. I'll meet the VP, one of the directors, and he brings a buddy of his who's a senior software engineer, and we'll go to that little booth to get our fast passes. And we don't have to wait. We just go on one roller coaster after another. It's like 4 hours solid until we have to get to the pavilion because Stellar, has a catered lunch and everything. And the CEO will make awards to people and recognize them for good work and hand out things. And everybody's got their kids with them. I get to meet them. And last year, I have one last thing, but as recruiters in our field, I've always felt a sense of high importance of what we do, because we are basically interjecting ourselves into a family's life, even though it's a short period of time, but we're involved in their career, which doesn't just affect the person, but their family.
You're right.
And in my opinion, I consider it somewhat sacred, and it's very important. It's almost, changing jobs can almost be as stressful as buying a house, that stress that people feel, because it does affect, the spouse, the children. If they have to move, the kids will be upset, they lose their friends. There's a lot of human things that are going on that we have to be, that we have to be aware of as well. So it's that type of thing where I've always felt like we are part of their lives, and we may be moving their career over here, setting them on a better trajectory. Mm-hmm. So not this past year in August, but the year before, one of the gentlemen that I hired came up to me at the pavilion when we're having our catered lunch, introduced his wife. Hi, how you doing? And we're talking. And then he says, excuse me for a minute. And he saw somebody. He wanted to go over and talk to somebody else. This was one of the most incredible things in my career. I was talking to his wife. She had this smile and glow on her face. And she looked at me and she said, I want to thank you for getting my husband that job. I have never seen him so happy. And what do I say? My hair standing on my arm. I'm like, wow. So, you never really know how you affect someone else's life unless you find out. But she was just thanking me profusely because her husband was so happy. And, thank you so much for getting him this job. He's so happy and life is so good. And, I'm like, wow, that's why we do it. It's not any other reason. It's little moments like that I'm putting in my, in my little personal treasure box, that when the end of my life comes, I can feel like I've got a little bit of a legacy. I did good.
That's awesome.
It's
really great to hear those success stories from candidates. It's very powerful.
It was unbelievable. Unbelievable. It still gives me chills when I think about it. It's like, wow. But awesome. You want to do good for people. You want to pay it forward. Like I said, I had nobody help me when I separated, but I want to do whatever I can to help transitioning vets, because I've been there. I've done it. I've been here a long time before technology started. I've been in the civilian commercial world. I've been in the DoD military world. I can potentially help by the benefit of my experience, what I've seen, situations I've been involved in, help them avoid some potential landmines. Say, no, you don't want to do that. This is why. Now, if they want to do it, it's up to them, but at least I can tell them, I can make the suggestion. I'm going to try to help you as best as I can. It's up to you to listen to me, but whatever I can do to help a vet, even if I can't hire them directly myself, I still want to help them, because I want them to get off on the best foot that they possibly can, because whatever they start out in could have profound ramifications 20, 30 years from now, because everything from here on out will be based and built on what they're doing today.
You're so right.
They get the right position
that's
now.
What makes the military community really special is the support and willingness to promote the individuals within that community.
Absolutely.
Well, Mac, it's always so special to get to have conversations with a veteran recruiter like yourself and get to partner with employers like Stellar. So thank you so much for joining me. Is there any last minute information or anything you would like to share for the veteran and military spouse community that might be interested in Stellar?
I basically just wanted to thank you for having me and for all that you do helping the transitioning military, the spouses. We've hired spouses. Even though we're IT, we never know what's next. And we actually, a couple years ago, we got a call from one of the colonels over at the base and said, I want an executive assistant. Okay, sir. We don't usually hire executive assistants, but I've done it in the past. So let's find an executive assistant. So we just never know. Right now we're looking for an HR specialist to work with my HR director. They don't have to have a clearance. They need to be a citizen, but they don't need certifications or anything. It'd be nice if they have some HR experience so they kind of know what to do. But they'll work at our Marine headquarter building with my HR director and support her and support us. That could be a military spouse right there. It doesn't, you don't have to have a military background. If they have any HR experience or anything along those lines, they might be a good match for that. And, I've hired my recruiting team. I had 2 recruiters I hired that are Air Force vets that were both ammo loaders. I was ammo, they were loaders. So I would build the bombs and take them down to the fighter planes and they would load them up under the wings. We worked as a team. And then I hired one of the recruiters' husbands as a project manager. So he's on board. So
that's really special.
It's really good. I love hiring vets, and we have a lot of our hiring managers are Air Force vets. We have former Marines, Navy, Army. We have Air and Army National Guard. We have reservists. We know what that's all about. So you don't get looked at cross-eyed when you have to do your 2 weeks annual training. Okay, we're prepared for that. We know what's going on. In the last year, though, we've had quite a few of our reservists get called up for active duty and get deployed. Oh, that's important too. I want the veterans to know that if they're working for us, they're a reservist. If they get deployed, military orders, depending on how long they're going to be out, we may have to fill their position because the work still has to be done. But we are obligated to rehire them when they come back. Now, hopefully we'll have the same or similar position when they get back, but we'll do whatever we can to reabsorb them back into the company because it was a military deployment.
Right.
They were serving our country. I don't know if civilian commercial companies will do that because they probably don't know what that is, for the most part. But that's just part of our DNA here because we're all primarily, most of us are former military. So we do take care of those vets if they're called up to active duty while they're, working for Stellar, and we will do whatever possible to rehire them back into the company. So
that's great. I think that's the right thing to do for our Guard and Reserve community. So Mac, thank you so much for spending a few minutes with us today. And we'll at the bottom we'll put your contact information for anyone that might want to connect with you on LinkedIn or put the Stellar website down there. So thank you so much for spending some time with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you for all you do.